Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Welcome to Your Best Game Ever by Monte Games. This is an installment of video series that we've really loved doing so far. This is a very topics very dear to our heart. Last time, which was our inaugural episode, we talked about how games use randomness and when randomness is more appropriate and when it's maybe not. And Monty taught us not to randomize fun. Fun should always be a definite. So this is our second installment of Your Best Game Ever. And Monty, do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so we talked to specifically the game masters pretty much last time. So today we're going to talk to players. Well, really, we're going to talk to everybody, right? Because what we're going to talk about today is finding the right group, for you. And this is a huge topic, because it involves not just finding a group, finding other gamers to game with, but it really involves getting in the right group because there's so many different play styles. There's so many different ways to enjoy this hobby, and not everybody plays the same way now, but everybody enjoys the same thing. Mm-hmm. So it's probably worth talking about how do you get in the right group.
Absolutely. So just to orient all of you in chat, thank you so much for coming. Monty and I are going to talk about and sort of start the discussion, but we would love it if you in chat would, chime in, let us know what you're thinking. And if you have some questions, call those out to me. I'm going to be watching chat, and we're going to have a little bit of a Q&A session at the end. So if you have some really juicy questions you want us to dig into, or dilemmas you want some advice on how to solve, post those in chat and we'll come around to them at the end. So we're so excited to do this with you. So cool. Where should we start? I think, maybe we have some new gamers in chat. Maybe we have some experienced gamers. Where do you like to think about this topic, Monty?
Well, it is absolutely true that one of the most common questions I think that I've gotten ever in my whole career is, how do I find other gamers? How do I find a group? I love role playing. I, have these books, but how do I find people to enjoy this with? And, the first thing that I would say, particularly here in 2018, is there's more gamers out there than you think.
Yeah.
Might not be the kind of situation where everyone is, that's what everyone is talking about. But, it has been my experience that once you kind of break open the floodgates, once you kind of crack through the veneer of, I don't want to talk about that because it's weird, you find out that tons of people are gamers. They used to be gamers. They're gamer curious, right?
Yes.
So it's not as hard as you would think, and there's so many great resources out there. And I'm going to say that the first really great resource that gamers have is their local game store, right?
Yeah.
Unlike so many other kinds of hobbies and things that you can do, gaming still has these places where, products are sold and gamers meet and they play games, right?
Where we lay our sacrifices to our gamer gods upon the altar. And
Exactly. Yes. That goes on in the basements. So.
Oh, you're right. That's a really good point.
Yeah. I mean, I bet that if you have a local game store, they're running games there. And if you don't have a group, show up, right? Mm-hmm. If you can join in, or just ask the person behind the counter, hey, can I get into a group? They'll have sometimes events, right, where you can get in, and these are not big commitments, right? Mm-hmm. If you show up and you're like, you're not having fun, don't show up next week, or whenever the next game is. What are some online resources that you can think of, Darcy, for finding other gamers?
Oh man, I existed so long as like a a person who wanted desperately to game and just, didn't fully, when I was really young, I just didn't fully understand like how that worked, or, I didn't really understand that game stores existed. I went to Games Workshop and was like, this smells like D&D, but it isn't, and I don't see any of the books. And so the internet was a huge resource for me. Right now, there's just so many great resources to take advantage of. So we have the wonderful creators of the Cypher Unlimited Discord in chat right now. And that's a really cool community that's especially, for any, and I think, although that's very Cypher specific, a lot of those people are very polygamerous. They like to play a lot of different kinds of games. And so I think finding, Discord communities where it's like these, sequences of chat rooms that are focused onto different topics, and going and finding big nerd spaces. A lot of times you'll be able to find out who's excited to game, who's looking for players. And a lot of those Discords are oriented around Twitch streams. Or big like nerdy media places like Geek and Sundry has a Discord, and those people love, gaming and are always looking to game more. So I feel like if you find, if you see people gaming like on YouTube or something, go find out where their community lives. And I bet that community wants to game too. So I think there's like community-based like little organizations, but there's also like Roll20, virtual tabletops exist, and play-by-post places exist. And those are full of forums where they need the structure to link people up with fellow gamers. So Roll20 is a great resource. I think, oh gosh, I'm blanking on the good play-by-post places these days, but if you Google that, those are great ways to find people. Trying to think of what else.
I think that what you just brought up though is a fantastic point that we can make larger here, right? That you can find a game group that doesn't even live near you, and this is, for an old guy like me, this is a relatively new phenomena that, it used to be that the problem was people would say, nobody plays D&D in my area. What do I do? Right? Nobody else in my high school plays D&D. What do I do? And now it doesn't even matter. Right. Yeah. You can play games with people in other countries, and other states, and, all over the place. And those games are, if you go to these places that Darcy's talking about, these sort of hubs, whether it's, a Discord, and I'm sure that no matter what game you play, whatever your favorite game is, even if you don't know about it yet, it's probably got a Discord, right? Yeah. And it's probably got a Facebook group.
Great point. Or Reddit, yeah.
Right, or Reddit forums, right? So, so I think that, just a little bit of searching, you can find other people who already like the game that you like.
Yeah.
And then, they're probably playing games online, right? If they're talking about games online, somebody there is running games online. And that's a great way to jump in as well.
Yeah, and for people who are newer to gaming and are, maybe don't know which kind of games are right for them, a big way that I got to explore a bunch of different games was, before streaming was really a thing, was I had some conventions, even little university conventions, a little college will have a convention you can find out about, or bigger, ones like Gen Con and bigger ones. And so I would just sign up to go play a bunch of different games. And that had the twofold benefit of, I get to try out a new game, which is exciting. I get to see what that gaming group does with that game. And a lot of times I've pulled out so many good friendships from those relationships that I sort of built my network by convention game playing and just hopping in on a random demo somewhere, right? So.
Yeah, I think that's actually a fantastic transition to, the other part of our goal here, right? Because it's not just about finding another group. It's about finding the right group, right? And probably one of the biggest things that you want to focus on there is, what game do they play? And I don't just mean, I play this game, so I only want to play with people who play that game. But I mean, like, taking the time to finding out what games are out there, and finding the game that actually fits your style the best, right? A lot of people will take a game that they've been playing for a long time and they'll mash it into the game that they want it to be, which is fine, right? But it's also worth sometimes the to take the time and find out, oh, there's actually already games out there that appeal to this particular kind of play style, right? So
Yeah.
so what I'm talking about here is like there are games that are really combat oriented, and if going and bashing orcs over the head and taking their stuff and exploring dungeons and everything, if that's your thing, right, there's plenty of games that will help you for that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're interested in uh, a more interactive game with lots of politics or lots of social interactions, or that kind of a game, there are wonderful games that appeal to that type of play as well. And I'm always an advocate that, like, whatever game you want to play, that's the right game. I don't
Yeah.
think there are any games that we're going to steer you away from, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that just recognizing that there are different games with different game styles, especially to newer gamers,
Yeah.
that's a revelation, right? You start playing D&D, and you just kind of assume that every game is like
Right.
D&D, and they're not, right? And so I think, like, the thing that you said about going to conventions, if you have the luxury of having like a convention that you could go to,
Right.
that is probably the best way, right? To just kind of, it's like going to a buffet, right? Try a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I like what you said about you know, I feel like so much of gaming is a constant learning process, right? I'm never going to be like, well, now I'm self-actualized and I totally understand everything I'm ever going to look out for a game, at least in my experience, because a lot of times I'm looking for different things in gaming at different times, right? So I think I played so much of really really combat heavy, very random plot, totally randomized plot games for like a full year of like every Friday, and so I was just so done with combat and like randomization, right? I wanted to get away from looking to tables to find out what attacked me in the night. But now that I'm away from that, I miss it, So now I'm back to wanting it again. But what you'd said about, one thing that really helped me when I was starting to learn about what I liked and what I was looking for, right, is splitting kinds of play and kinds of experiences into three categories, right? So combat and interaction, like you said, and I think exploration was the other one, or
Oh, sure.
discovery,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So and so I think if you can, there's lots of places to go read about that or go think about that. But just when I ran my first campaign, I was really nervous about trying to figure out what other people wanted from their game, right? And so I had them
Right.
complete a survey. I was like, how much do you care about combat? How much do you care about talking to people? How much do you care about exploration or mystery? It helped me sort of get a sense of which players were going to get bored with combat fast, and which were, just to sort of like watch that player to see if they're getting bored, right? So I feel like those categories were really helpful for me learning about what I liked and what other players might like. I'm not sure if you have
Yeah.
other things, other like criteria you think about, like
Uh,
broad.
there, there, there are other criteria, but I did want to just say, I think that I just wanted to reinforce what you just said. I think that understanding that different people want different things out of a game is so crucial,
Mm-hmm.
and it's one of those things that you know until you sit down and think about it, or you really start talking to people, you assume that they're all getting the exact same fun out of a game that you are,
Right.
right? And so, like, when I wrote the third edition DMG, right, I talked about the different sort of categories of, there's people who just sort of like to have problems to solve,
Yeah.
right? And there's people who, and so, like, they just love puzzles and
Mm-hmm.
things like that, right? But then there's other people who just like combat. Then there are people who think of combat as a puzzle,
Right.
right? And this is a problem to be solved, right? And so they don't really care so much. They still really enjoy combat. They don't care so much about hit points and
Right.
damage per round. They want to figure out the way to maneuver people next to the cliff so that you can push them all off, or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
um and so I think that's that is a really important thing to recognize. But you asked about what are other considerations,
Yeah.
and I think that I think there are some really good ones to be thinking about. Things that go beyond just like combat or interaction, because every group sort of has different styles. And what I mean by that is, does the group play one big long campaign that goes on for 5 years, or do they like shorter things? Do they play lots of one shots
Mm-hmm.
so that they get to try lots of different games? And so when you're trying to find out if this is the right game group for you, that's probably one of the things that you want to find out early on, right? And you want to make sure that whatever you want out of a game, like if you want to create a character and tell a big epic story, but then you find out that the game group that you've joined, they only play 1 or 2 sessions and then they switch to another game, not necessarily a good fit, right? What other kinds of things can you think of that are like that?
Yeah. This is less about the game specifically and more about like really focusing in on the group. Something I've noticed is how people have different communication styles, like gaming aside, right? This is a social activity
Right.
that is running into how people interact on a fundamental level. And so some groups I've joined, you know, like are more open to like feedback, or are more open to change, or when I've joined a totally new group, or especially like a group that's been working together for a while, sometimes it's taken me a while to figure out their rhythms and then start to understand like what just like how they operate. So there's a group that's been playing in Ken Height's game on Monday nights for years and years and years, and like the people have changed a little bit over time, but it's been this like very like solid structure. And so I came in and I was like, let's make a game about kissing, and they were like but it's fun to see how we grew together too, because I was like, there were some aspects of things that I might have done in other games that I toned down a little bit, because I could see it was like, is this the kind of stories they're comfortable telling? And I checked in with them, and they would always be like, oh yeah, it's okay. But some groups are very aggressive about like session zeros, and here, like, let us explicitly state, here are the types of stories we're interested in playing. And some groups are more like, you kind of have to, if they don't have that structure in place, you kind of have to figure it out as you go.
Right.
And I don't think
Right.
either of those is necessarily bad. I like it to be all out on the table, but I can work with both, right? But I think it's something to know. If you're someone who would have trouble like bringing it up later on unless there was a structure for it, maybe you want to bring that to your group.
I also am a big advocate of getting it all out there on the table,
Yeah.
right? And it all comes down to, we're doing this for fun, and so if we're not having fun, why are we doing it?
Yeah.
And so let's check in with everybody every once in a while, and find out, are you having fun, right? Did you enjoy, if you just finished a big adventure, did you enjoy it? What was your favorite part of that adventure, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with asking those questions, and even if you're not the game master, right?
Yeah.
I think we normally put all that onus on the game master, but it doesn't have to be, right? It could be just one of the players can just be talking to the other players and find out, did you enjoy that? Is that the kind of thing that you want to do? We're going to go off on a new adventure here soon. Is that the kind of, do you want to do another thing like that? And, I speak as someone who is almost always the game master in the groups that I'm in. If a player asked me, hey, Monte, did you enjoy that adventure that we just went through? Right? I mean, that would be awesome,
that would be
right?
so cool. Yeah.
And I would love to then, kind of speak my mind and provide the feedback of, yeah, I really liked it. And I really liked how you guys kind of went off on your own direction and did this thing. And I wasn't expecting that. And that was so much fun for me, or whatever. Right. So I really encourage, I think just overall, and now I'm kind of getting on a soapbox and a little off the topic, right? But we put so much pressure on the game master to run the game, often host the game, right? And then also be sort of the social glue that holds everything together. And, it doesn't have to be that way. I think that, I mean, and actually that reminds me of another thing, another quality that varies from
Mm.
group to group. And that is there one person who kind of is always the person running the games, or does it rotate around, right? Because like if you want a chance to run a game and you're going to join this new group, find out if that's actually a possibility or if,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a really good point. And I like how it's silly to me for like as long as I've been gaming and I game with a lot of different groups, it's never occurred to me to have those. The chat is listing a lot of different little structures that people use for questions, comments, concerns at the end, or give me a rose, a thing that you loved about this session, and a thorn, a thing that wasn't as great. And there are various structures like that, but I almost never see those turned to the GM.
right,
So
right.
thinking about GM, when we talk about finding the group that's right for you, the GM is playing the game, right? They've been playing it
She's a
in often a
player.
different
She's a
way,
player, right?
right? Absolutely. So that's kind of a fun thing to think about. Um,
You
yeah.
know, the story that I often tell, often in the context of Invisible Sun is a game where I designed it so that at the end of every session, right, the character, everyone gives a character summary. They talk about
Mm-hmm.
what their character did, what they enjoyed, what they didn't, and all that kind of thing. And some of that is meant to be, I mean, it's all couched in the sense of the character, but really it can also be for the player too, right?
Mm-hmm.
They can, that's a time where you can talk about, well, I finally got to have a big fight, and I've been really longing to try out this new spell or whatever, and that's feedback, right? that
Yeah.
that's that's valuable feedback. And the story that I always tell is I was running a D&D game long time ago, and there was one player who I saw, she was kind of quiet all the time. She participated, but she wasn't super effusive. And
Mm-hmm.
so I thought she wasn't having a very good time. And so, after maybe about the fourth or fifth session, I talked to her after the game, and I just started asking her, are you having fun? Is this fun? And she just all of a sudden started going into all these great explanations of the interior world that she had,
Yeah.
of like, oh, my character hates this particular NPC, and loved it when this happened, and all this stuff. And so, yeah, she was having a great time, but it was all sort of internal, and that really taught me again one of those differences between players is that sometimes there's a lot going on inside, and sometimes it's all right there on the table. And the only way to kind of find out is to talk to people and find out, just ask the question, are you having a good time,
Yeah.
right?
One question that got kind of brought up that I think is a nice segue from here is every once in a while, at least in my experience, sometimes you don't have to ask the person. They're not having fun, and that can be very stressful for
Yeah,
everyone involved, right? So
right.
one thing Chad asked was whether we had any advice or thoughts about, okay, so if you try out these different groups, do we have any advice for kind of gracefully exiting a group that is currently running a game that is not a right fit for you? And sometimes like the people could be totally fine. They might be very close friends of yours. You may love them in other gaming contexts, but like whatever came together about this specific game is just not working for you. Do you have any advice about how to navigate that?
I do, and it's the advice that I always give, and it's the advice that people hate to hear.
Okay.
uh, because it's just bite the bullet and talk about it,
Yeah.
right? And just be upfront and just say as nicely as you can, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a fun game. Everyone's having a great time. This isn't really what I'm looking for, for every other Friday night.
Yeah.
Um, but maybe, if you guys start playing a different game later, you can, see if
Right.
I can come back or whatever. But I think I think you just have to do it,
Yeah.
right? And it's the same, although albeit maybe even a harder situation if you turn it around and it's the group who's all having a great time and there's one person who's
Yeah.
not, and you kind of have to talk to that person, right? And just kind of say, this isn't a great fit.
Mm-hmm.
And then, kind of recommend the things that we just talked about, at the beginning, where it's just like, there are lots of great ways to find a group. And I'm sure there are groups out there you would have a lot more fun playing with
Mm-hmm.
than this one, because our styles just aren't quite meshing. And just, you know, be honest, right? It's
It's
weirdly
super
like
hard.
dating.
It is so like dating. Oh my gosh.
Right? You just kind of, I mean, you're not going to just keep going out with someone because you don't want to say
Right.
you don't want to break up with them, right? I mean, you just do it, and it's hard, and
And as horrible as the like it's not you, it's me thing is, I do think it's helpful to like to try to even if it is a little personal sometimes, I think it has gone over in my experience a little better when you really focus on the fact that it's our styles are not meshing. Like if you can identify very specific ways of fun that someone's having that are sort of taking away from the fun from other people, if you can like talk about it as opposed to like you are the bad player in this game and instead
oh, right,
say, you know, I see that you are really excited about being a really big chaos monkey and you just want to like just tear apart this world while these other people are trying to build it up. And like those are both good games, but they're not great games together. So I think we need to, you know, separate things out there. So I think it, you know, so the more you can be a little more good at the stronger you can get at identifying why things work the way they do, why you're having the fun you have. I think that language is really helpful for navigating those social complications
right,
too.
right. Like one thing that you could do, particularly if you're the GM, you know, if you've got the, like you said, the character who's interested in tearing everything down, you know, you can kind of, you could even say, you know, look, you're clearly, you know, that's what you are enjoying, that's the kind of gameplay that you're enjoying, but I'm gonna tell you that, you know, upcoming sessions that we've got planned out and the storylines that I've got worked out, that's not gonna work, right? That's not
Right.
the kind of scenarios that we're going to be undertaking. So you might, I mean, for your own good, right? For
Right.
your fun, you might not want to keep playing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, and you know, unlike dating, right? A breakup with a game group doesn't have to be forever, right? If
Totally.
you know, if you're playing Call of Cthulhu and you know that you're going to be playing it for the next 3 months, and your friend hates horror, right, or thinks that Lovecraft is stupid, and tentacles are dumb, or whatever,
Let me at
um,
him.
then you know, just say, hey, you know, we're going to be doing this for 3 months, but after that, we're going to be playing something else, and we'll make sure that we invite you back and see if you enjoy that more, or whatever, right?
Yeah, I wish I could just be vocalizing everything that's happening in chat right now because it's a really good conversation. So there's a thank you so much for engaging and talking to each other because this is really cool to watch. And we just can't cover it all, which I think is something Monte brought up as we, you know, this we try. We're like, okay, let's do a cool player focused topic because you know there isn't as much advice that I've seen out there about you know becoming a better player and
Right.
learning all the tools that it takes to have great games as a player. But finding the group that's right for you initially seemed so nice and pithy, and but we could be here all day, you know. So
True.
keep the conversation going. I'm gonna tag me if you want to call it a specific question, but keep it going.
I have one other point I really want to make because
Yeah.
it's a big one, and I think uh, it's one that I think is really important, and that is the best way to find the group that is right for you is to create it. Right, the
Yep.
best way is for you to pick your three sort of geek adjacent friends
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, let's try this game, right? And introduce new people to the game. Because I have to tell you that, like, if you and a few other people start a new game group, you like it will just happen. Your
Yeah.
gaming tastes, your gaming style will develop together,
Yeah.
right? And you will find that you're enjoying the same kinds of things because you're experiencing them all for the first time together. And so you know, finding people who aren't gamers but who you know would like to be a gamer is again probably not very hard, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you've got geek friends, if you've got friends who love Lord of the Rings movies and Star Wars and you know can't wait for the new Doctor Who to start, they're probably gamers in waiting, right? And,
Absolutely.
and they're probably going to love it. They're probably going to love the, you know, the idea. And you know, if you try with three or four people, one of them probably won't be into it, but
Right.
you'll suddenly have two or three new gamers, right?
Yeah.
And I really this is also, this is kind of a soapbox topic for me too, but you know, I hear a lot of people talk about, I want to invoke this kind of change in the gaming world. I want to
Mm.
have more diverse games. I want to have
Yeah.
games that are more positive on toward these values that I have. Well, this is the way to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're the person who is starting the game, you're probably also the person who goes out and finds the game that you're going to support,
Yeah.
right? And you're going to, you can go on Kickstarter or go to your game store or whatever, right? And find, this is the kind of game I want to there to be more of. And then you introduce it to people, and what do you know, right? Pretty soon we all there are more games like that, right? It's the thought leader kind of
Yeah.
experience. And so if more people who cared about kind of bringing about change and had concerns were became these thought leaders, rather than waiting for other people to be the thought leader and bring the new game to them, then we would see that change happen.
Yeah, and I see that too in, podcasts and RPGs are peanut butter and jelly, as far as I can tell. Same with streams, right? And so I think some people, even who aren't able to get the group they wanted, or I think some people who are just full of love for RPGs and want to play so bad and want to talk about it and want to be those thought leaders and make those changes. I think sometimes they end up blogging, they end up, podcasting or joining a stream, something like that. And those are really valid ways to contribute to the community too. So I think,
For sure.
yeah, I think there's a lot of ways people do it. But GMing, I I went to Gen Con and 1 year, and I just wanted to try out a couple new games, and I snuck my way into a Numenera game, and I fell head over heels in love. And so I knew that no one was going to run that game for me, right? I wanted that game to happen. I wanted tentacles. And so I brought it home and decided I would learn to GM. And I did, and I GM'd a bunch of one shots, but I was really nervous about running a campaign. So I just wanted to advocate for people who might be, still a little nervous about the GMing. Sounds like a lot. First of all, it's great and it's wonderful, and there's so many resources to help you. You're going to do awesome, and I want to play in your game. Second of all, after that soapbox, co-GMing is an option that you should think about. I think someone was talking about how the additional duties of GMs, like the social navigation, tends to fall on GM. Like that can be seen as sort of a big burden, and I think, depending on your group, or I think you can engineer that a little with a co-GM, right? You have someone else, or even just a really supportive player who kind of helps you coordinate your game. So I think the way you build your group and the way you talk honestly about splitting up duties can really help make those things go even easier for you. So don't look at them as very difficult. And like my style of grabbing those geek adjacent people and turning them into gamers is everyone likes to eat.
True.
I'm not a good cook, but everyone likes to eat, especially in grad school. If you get some hungry grad students, you have so many potential gamers in waiting that you should definitely go seize upon. That's my hot tip.
Let me throw out one other thing too, and this comes from personal experience. If there's a game that you really want to play, and you think that it would really fit your style, and you want to kind of take on that role of thought leader, but GMing just isn't your thing,
Yeah.
um, you can still sort of be that thought leader. I have had game groups where, because I was often the GM, and someone came up to me, handed me a game that they had bought, right, and said, "I would really like to play this."
Whoa.
You're damn right I ran that game, right? I
Cool.
mean, that's kind of really sort of every GM's dream, is
Yeah.
a player coming up to them and saying, "Here, I want to play this,"
I'm
right?
invested. I will. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, um, even if you don't want to be the GM, you can still sort of be the creator of the group and the fosterer of the games that you want to play.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Uh, let's see. Do we have any other big topics want to make sure we hit before we get into some of the chat questions? Let's see.
Well, So it's probably worth mentioning. I don't know, maybe we were going to save this to the end, but it is probably worth mentioning that this is a huge topic. This is, in fact, many, many topics, right?
Right.
Because, there are things that we could be talking about not just finding the right game group, but kind of fostering and building your game group and bringing them closer together, and all these different things that we could be talking about. And there just isn't time just in our one little Twitch show here to do it today. But it is going to be a major focus of a book that I'm soon working on called Your Best Game Ever, which is a brand new project that Monte Games is doing. We're going to be later, but soon, later this month, we're going to be launching a Kickstarter for this book. And it's going to cover all of this kind of material and a lot more. And it's going to have world building and GMing tips and even more kinds of player tips, hosting games, running games online. It's going to even have some stuff for, if you're an interested perhaps game designer, there'll be sections in there for you. We want this to be a book for the entire hobby, right? If you play role-playing games, this book's for you. And I won't go too much more into the sort of sales pitch mode here, but I bring it up because we recognize this is a big topic, and it's going to be a big topic in the book. And it's probably going to be one that because we're going to continue doing this series, we hope that it'll be one that we continue to talk about as well.
Yeah. Oh man. And if you go to the link that I posted up there, the what's in your best game ever, if you scroll down, there's a list of a bunch of topics that are going to be touched upon, but it's going to be really, really expansive, which will be fun. And there's even a little bit on there of, people who play a lot of games, run a lot of games. If you're homebrewing stuff, you're becoming a game designer, right? We're gonna speak a little bit to that too, which I think will be really cool for people. Yay.
Yeah.
Further, since I have you on the web article, before we dive into some of your great questions, we opened up comments on that page, and we want to hear about what your big challenges are when you're in your gaming, right? So tell us about like things that you would like to see tackled in this book, or challenges that it would be cool for me to read too, because maybe that there's a series of topics that would make sense as another Twitch episode too, for your best game ever's installments.
For sure, that's a great idea.
Keep us updated on what you're eager to hear about, more than in just the Q&A. So yeah, I'm very excited. Stay tuned for more. There's going to be a lot of details coming your way very soon. All right. Should we dive into a couple of these questions?
Take some questions.
Yes. Cool. There was one from Blues Lives that I thought was really interesting that is asking, so let's say you've got a group. They're a great group. They're so perfect and lovely. You don't want to change a thing about them except that they only want to play one game all the time. They're really, do you have any advice about helping people sort of step out of their comfort zone, try a new game, or things like that? How can you help a group maybe try a new game?
I think that, well, again, the example that I gave, handing the game master a new game or a new adventure or whatever, right, is a huge step forward, because it means so much, right? It means that you're going to be invested. It means that it was important enough to you, and it's a gift, right? Mm-hmm. So it's got a lot going for it.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I think that, you can, we gather together every week or every other week or how often your game group meets. And, it's first and foremost kind of a social gathering, and it's kind of secondarily a game.
Yeah.
Because you're there to be with your friends and whatnot. And so, there's a lot of conversations that go on that aren't in character, right? Where you're just sitting around the table or whatever. And, bringing up situations where, like, if there's an experience, a kind of adventure, a kind of encounter, kind of challenge that you think would be fun, that you think that whatever game they're playing can't quite do, right? I
Yeah.
mean, maybe it's something as simple as, you're playing D&D, but you really want to play a science fiction game, or at least give it a try. You could start talking about, the cool episode of the new Star Trek series that you just saw, and wouldn't it be cool to play through that as an adventure? But of course we would have to play this other game, right? And
Yeah.
just kind of, rather than just sort of being like, I want to play Traveler, you know, show them why, right? Show
Right.
them the things that you can't quite do playing the game you're playing now, and giving this other game a try, and make it really clear, right? That it doesn't have to be, you're not asking them to give up their favorite game forever,
Yeah.
right? Anything like that. And the other pushback that you'll get is, oh, I don't want to learn a whole new game system.
Right.
Right. And so, but the real truth of it is that most games anyway are just, they're not that hard, right? You once you understand sort of how role-playing games work,
Yeah.
right? All the other stuff is, what they call the stats, and, whether you roll a 20-sided die or a handful of 6-siders or whatever, does that really matter that much? Yeah, you have to learn it, but it's not that big of a deal. The big hurdle is kind of getting people to pretend that they're other people.
Yeah.
And, once you've done that, the rest of it is all just, it's actually, people get it. People think it's a bigger deal than it is, I guess is what I'm saying.
And especially if you're like, I've even seen it where, like sharing that GM load, I've seen it where, if someone played in a really good game of Traveler and they really loved it and they would like to play it with this group, but they don't want to GM it, they can, a lot of times at a table, some player is really a good repository of knowledge about how the rules work, or if there is some specific finicky bit about the system, it's possible that, like, the GM doesn't have to, be perfect, a perfect replicator of what the game engine is, right? So
Right. Yeah. Find the person around the table who just really likes learning all the rules and stuff, and show them.
So
a copy
grateful
of the
for them.
rules, right?
They are valuable assets. That's really good. Let's see. I think that's some helpful advice. People said a great way is to offer to GM it yourself. I think lots of GMs are open to the idea of taking a break, especially if it's for like a one shot. That's a low commitment for anybody, right? So try that. And I think Monte's point that, like, couching why you want to play that game and the experience it will give you in that group, that's a really good persuasive point. You show them the thing that you are most excited by, that you think they'll really be hooked on to, right? Is it the cool spaceships, and we're going to be able to modify spaceships, and everyone here has a, deep love of spaceships? It's worth it.
Because you do, right?
Because everyone does.
There's one other thing I was going to say too, and that is that, like, if you've got a group and you're playing, and they're, every other Friday you play Pathfinder, and that's what you play, and that's what everyone does, but you really want to play, Gumshoe, then a way to do that is to talk to some or all of those people and say, you know what, I'm not going to intrude on every other Friday night, right? That's what we do. But hey, how about a one shot on Wednesday night, right? I'm going to run, and suddenly it seems kind of less threatening, right? You're not asking people to change. You're just asking them to do something new and different on the side.
Yeah.
That's kind of a good transition.
Yeah, that's a great point. It doesn't have to be trade-offs at all, depending.
Right.
Another question folks were asking about that I think plays into this really nicely is Rourke was asking about, sort of a component of group fit might just be the logistics, right? How are people's availability? And do we have any suggestions for accommodating players in a group, or if you are the player, finding a good group if your availability is kind of variable? Do you have any advice for that?
Well, so I've been in groups where, we said, we play on Monday nights, and Monday nights is the time we play. And, we just sort of made that the commitment, right?
Mm.
In the same way that, I don't know, people always go to church on Sunday morning, right? We always gamed on Monday night. And I've also been in groups where we didn't do that at all,
Mm.
right? We met, and then at the end of that session,
Pick the next
we
one.
said, when can everyone get together again?
Yeah.
It's also very handy if you have a way to make it so that if one person can't show up, you still get to play, because that's such a bummer, right?
Right.
To get everyone together and, oh, we're going to play on Wednesday. Oh, but then suddenly one person can't show, and everyone's fun is canceled that night. And so, setting things up, if you know that everyone's going to have a really variable schedule, setting things up so that you don't end the session on a cliffhanger, right? So
Good
if all
point.
of a sudden one or two players can't make it next time, that's okay. Their characters are off doing something else, right? Or, playing more episodically that way, or or just somehow inserting something into the narrative that makes it easier for people to kind of come and go.
That is so perfect. I realized I had misinterpreted Rourke's question a little bit. She was specifically asking about what if a GM is sort of the variable player, right?
Oh, right.
But again, I think that's the best piece of advice that I would think of is structure your game such that it's a little compartmentalized, right? Do you have an alternate GM? Do you have a how can you bring it to a nice end so that you pick up at different points?
Yeah, that reminds me of, I also have had the experience where, because of schedules like that, what we did was we had two different games with two different
Ooh.
GMs.
Same
And
system or like totally different?
totally different.
Wow.
And but the idea was that, because there were always the same people were the variables, right? And so if one person could show, then we would play.
Nice.
I think it was D&D and Call of Cthulhu at the time, right? If everyone can show, we played D&D. But if one player who often couldn't make it,
Yeah.
right, then we played Call of Cthulhu, and so it wasn't a matter of everyone being disappointed. It was just, oh, we're going to play this other game, and it worked out really well.
That's really cool. I like that intercalated sort of campaigns style. That's really really neat. And I've had it where people. I grew up in a very lucky gaming situation, at least in grad school. I had no gaming for a long time, and then suddenly everyone wanted to be a GM and had a million different systems they wanted to run. So everyone was quietly waiting with their one shot in their back pocket, waiting
Right.
for the day the GM was sick, So wishing and hoping. So that's one style, I guess.
It accomplishes the same thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then maybe we have time for one more question before we get to our end. Thank you so much, chat. Like everybody's saying, this is just a really hopping chat tonight, and I would love to see this keep going. And please, bring those conversations to. We have a Facebook groups about Cypher System Gaming, and there's the tabletop role playing games, big Facebook group if you want to talk about all kinds of games. There's the Discord that I put a link to. So don't keep those conversations going. And if you think of any like really specific, kind of specific questions and challenges that you might want to see this book deal with, which other details that I can't tell you about, but there are reasons you really want you want to hear this. God, I can't reveal anything. But if you have some specific challenges, please go post it on that web article so that we can look at it and know to either bring it into one of these video chats or address it in the book. I think that would be really cool. So keep it going. But let's deal with one final question. And that is, I kind of like the symmetry of this. So I can't pronounce their username. It starts with a J, but they asked about session zeros, setting the stage for a new group, a new game. What are sort of our best tips for making that really successful and setting the stage well? And I like that that's coming at the end of this sort of program. So how do you begin a really good group?
Yeah, I think that just asking the kinds of questions, they're like, you can be very general, right? Like, what what's the activity in a role-playing game that you enjoy the most, right? Do you like combat? Do you like interacting with
Right.
NPCs? You can be very general like that. But the advantage of a session zero also is that you can be very specific, right? Because if someone's already like put together or in the process of putting together their character, you can say to them, where, if this was a television show, right, what would you like to see this character's arc through
Ooh.
the whole thing go?
Yeah.
And again, this is something that we've implemented in Invisible Sun, but we are also going to put into your best game ever, so you can use it in any single game that you play, right? But this idea that you build a character arc with steps and moves towards a climax and whatnot, and so choosing that as a player for your character allows you to tell the GM, okay, so my name is Montoya, and someone, this guy killed my father. I want to find him,
Yeah.
and he has to prepare to die. Right. So then that's communicating so much, right? I want to find the guy who killed my father. There's probably going to be, I want to be a character who fights a lot. I'm a great swordsman.
Yeah.
There's mystery involved because I have to find where this guy is, right? And so you're feeding future adventures. You're feeding the kinds of encounters you want to have. That's such valuable feedback, I think.
You're blowing my mind, Monte. Gosh, I love character arcs. As a player, and I like what they communicate as a GM too. But I hadn't considered taking that character arc and asking what it's telling me about what that player wants to see happen, right? You can break that down into those components of play that we talked about earlier. That is really clever. And I want to drive home the point that, like, yes, this your best game ever is going to be a book full of like advice and tools. And when we say that you're going to talk about character arcs in there, you're talking about like you will be able to look at the character arc section and take it to whatever game you're playing, right? It's like very actionable. I'm really excited for that. It is a tool. You're going to take it out of that book and not just let it think, you're not going to have to build your own. This is going to be advice for how to just have character arcs now in your games. Right.
We'll break down the, 20 best character arcs that we can think of in a very general way and how to apply it to your game. And, the whole idea of character arcs is that, there's stages in them, right?
Yeah.
So it's not all just sort of, do I find the guy who killed my father, right? It's, step by step. So it in the way that like an episodic television show or a role-playing game campaign proceeds, right? And so, like you said, it'll be totally actionable. You can take stuff out of this book and apply it directly to your game. It's not just sort of ephemeral theory, right? It's stuff you can use.
One thing I would add to the session zero would be like, there's lots of different techniques for communicating at the table about what you all want to have happen in this game. So there's the thumbs up, yes please, more of that. But there's also things that maybe come along with the genre that you're like, let's steer away from that. Or,
point.
And there are lots of systems that people use sort of during play, like X cards or no thank you evil, right? If things get too scary in no thank you evil, they get to shout it and point to the no thank you evil token. And we steer away from the thing that just got a little too intense for kids, but that it is 100% as applicable to adults too. So I always try to take some time, especially if I'm the GM. I like to be the first person to say it. I'm like, hi, I'm Darcy. Here, these are the things I like, and these are some things that I've, could come up in a game like this, and I'm not really interested in, because I'm the GM, I'm not really going to deal with like really gross body horror. Like that's not I'm not good at describing it, and I don't want to do it, so it's not happening. And so I'll list a couple things, and then that kind of gets the greases, the greases the wheels for other people to be like, oh yeah, here are things that I just don't have a lot of fun with, or maybe it's chase scenes or something. Maybe someone had a very bad time with too many chase scenes in a game and they just don't want to deal with it. It could be so many things, but I think it's valuable to know what you don't want to see as well as what you do want to see in a game.
That is such a good point. That because there are things that we have, if you've been a gamer for a while, you've seen come up, right? Like the moral quandary. Some people love
Oh,
that,
yeah, good
right?
point.
Right. I mean, the sort of terrible one is the, oh, there's orc babies,
Oh, yeah.
in
Yep.
D&D, right? What do you do with the orc babies, right? Or just what do you do with the prisoners or whatever it is, right? And some people love that, right? Some people, that's why they play role-playing
Yeah.
games, and that's great. But some people, don't want to deal with that at all, or they're like, we dealt with that the last campaign. Let's steer
Yeah.
clear of that. That's a really, really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I was
You
struggling to
can
think of
also,
another example. Moral quandary is a very common one. That's good.
yeah. Yeah. Or, it can also just be like, I want, this is both a positive and a negative, right? I mean, I want there to be lots of action, right?
Yeah.
So, if we're going to have scenes where we spend a whole session just kind of shopping,
Yeah.
that's something I'd like to avoid. Or, give me a heads up if the shopping a session is coming up. I'll miss that one or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, or I had this deep desire to have like a good campfire scene. You know, it's a thing you see in TV shows. It's just about the characters sitting around doing nothing, but learning to see a little more about them. And I've just like always wanted to have that in a role playing game experience, and I finally got to have it in one group because there's sort of permission to take it slow because we all agreed we were interested in a little bit of this like action and then comfort coming back to the campfire talking to each other. We decided we wanted to see how that felt and if it was fun. And you can always change it later, right? I think check-ins are good, but session zeros, talking about what you want, talking about what you don't want is a great way to start.
So if I can just interject
Oh,
with
please.
one little GM tip, just off
Yeah.
topic, but it's specifically pertain because I know exactly what you mean by the
Yeah.
campfire. And that is that here's the thing that I think people do wrong. I
Ooh.
think they try to do those scenes too early in the game.
Mm.
Because like if people haven't found their footing with their character yet,
Yeah.
and they don't really know how they react to the other characters yet, nobody really has anything to say.
Yep.
But if you wait until like session 3 or 4 or even farther where people kind of have their footing, you'll have a great campfire scene.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Maybe it was that I've always tried for it too early. And I was also the GM. I usually try for it as a player, and I'm very bad at realizing characters. So I think that's really smart. Time it after a big climax or something where they have something to talk about.
Yeah, true, right? That's definitely true.
Awesome. All right. Well, I know we could be here many, many, many more hours. Thank you all so much, chat, for your wonderful discussion, for your great questions. Keep those conversations going wherever it is that you discuss, your games with your home groups, with your online communities, with new wonderful online communities you're going to meet because you're going to meet the best gaming group for you ever. But we've got a few announcements real quick for you. We should touch base about one thing we haven't talked about at all is your best game ever. We are going to, in addition to being this series, we want to make this incredible book that's going to be full of really actionable, careful, crafted, broad, and like far-reaching advice for players and GMs of all role-playing games. And I'm really excited for that resource. But we're also going to be for Cypher fans out there, because I know you're in the chat, we're also going to be taking some of that deep thought and some of the other new design that's come along since the first release of the Cypher System rulebook, and we're going to be incorporating it into a new book. Monte, do you mind telling people a little bit about what that's all about?
Sure. So, I mean, the basic story is we had to do a new Cypher System rulebook anyway, right?
Yeah.
We're almost out, or we're soon to be out,
Yeah.
and so we started talking, and suddenly there's all these great ideas for things that we can do, and none of it has to do with changing the rules, right? The rules of the Cypher System are going to remain the same, but there are ways of implementing things. Like this book will have, rather than 90 pages of foci, it will have a much smaller section of how to make your own foci that is exactly the one you want, that fits the genre that you're playing perfectly. So whether you're playing superheroes or espionage,
Yes.
making it particularly appropriate. We want to play up the idea of subtle ciphers. The subtle ciphers were introduced into the original CSR And what we realized is that really kind of needs to become the default kind of cipher, because that's the kind of cipher that fits no matter what genre you're playing. Yep. And so we're going to add a whole bunch of new subtle ciphers and a way to devise those. And, some of the stuff that we are implementing in the new Numenera Discovery and Destiny that are coming out, we also want to implement here things like player intrusions, right? Yes. That go along with GM intrusions, and how to make those work in whatever genre that you want to play in, things like that. And then lastly, we want to take all the concepts that we're bringing up with your best game ever, like character arcs, like the world building advice that it's going to have, all these sorts of things, and we're going to bake them right into the new CSR, so that these things will become a part of the rules.
Yeah.
So whereas we'll be talking about like character arcs in your best game ever and how to implement them in various games, in the Cypher System rulebook we will present the material, but we will say, and this is exactly how many XP you get right. for this, and it'll all be baked into the rules and whatnot. And also I'll point out too that one of the things that we did with the new Numenera books is we focused a lot more on character abilities that were not combat oriented, because that was some feedback that we got from a lot of players. And so taking that approach, again, not changing the way things work, but changing the options, giving you more options basically for when you make your characters is important. It's part of this. So that's what we're doing. That's the other kind of half of the Kickstarter that we have coming up, is this new Cypher System rulebook. We're very excited about it. I kind of think of them as these kind of nice companion volumes that'll go nicely together, and one will build off of the other. And it's an MCG Kickstarter, so if we hit some stretch goals, there'll probably be more books that will go along with that. So
if I'm not allowed to reveal any secrets, neither are you, Monte.
Fair enough.
More information soon, though. I'm very excited. I do feel like, for any of you budding game designers out there, I think it'll be really cool to see how, how this, your best game ever is going to represent all of this great advice and all of this great thought about how we game and how, gaming works and how it doesn't work and how to make it really sing. And then to see that implemented in the specific context of like a specific rule set. So I think people who are curious about game design should really take a close look at those two, right? It's to say, here's how, if Monte has, really thought about this book as, design philosophy or game philosophy, here's how it's realized in a game setting, which will be really fun. So get excited for that. All right. So more on your best.
Yeah. I just want to reiterate, just so it's perfectly clear, though, even if you don't play Cypher, right? Yes. Even if you have no interest in the Cypher system, your best game ever applies to every game that's out there, every role playing. It is system agnostic.
We just have a few announcements, then we're done. So keep your ears to the MCG website and other places for more news on your best game ever and the new Cypher System rulebook details. You're all here on our lovely Twitch channel. Thank you. We are also other things you can find on this channel coming up soon are this Friday. We just announced it today. We're going to have a guest Invisible Sun stream happening on our channel, which is really exciting. It's called The Truth Bleeds at Twilight. And it happens in our old beloved Raven Wants What You Have slot at 7 p.m. Pacific. It's going to be happening bi-weekly. And so this Friday will be sort of a first session introduction to what's going to be happening. And it's made by some lovely people with some beautiful graphics, and they already have Twitter accounts for their characters, so get really excited for that. I think it's going to be awesome. So that's Friday at 7 p.m. Pacific. And then this coming Tuesday, we're going to have our fourth episode of Bearing the Light. Goodness. Which is the super fun Numenera campaign run by Monte for Shauna Germain, Bruce Cordell, Sean Reynolds, and myself. And it's all getting a taste of Numenera as you know it and more, right? So it's the Numenera discovery and destiny content and character options, just exploring and creating and discovering in a world of wonderful far future technology and magic. So that's Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific. We will definitely have some other things you'll be wanting to look at on the schedule coming forward. So always check out that online events page, which has been popping up in chat. So I think that's the announcements we have for right now. Anything you got for us, Monte?
Sounds like a lot.
It's a lot, yeah. All right. Please tell us about your games. Tell us about how this is working for you. And if you have more topics you want to hear discussed, go post them on that website. And we would love to talk about this more. Thank you so much for being a great chat.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll talk to you soon.